It was a time long forgotten, in a place far from our own, where nature and people lived together to serve one another. It was a time of wonder and a place of beauty. The place was called Airn, and in this place were many kingdoms and many sights to see. Some of the kingdoms lived with nature to serve in peace and harmony, but some also used nature to serve the cause of selfishness and slavery for its own purpose. Airn was a land of many different places and people. There were the desert races and the forest natives. There were the sea nations and those that lived in the clouds. Most of the people of Airn lived in harmony with the spirits of nature. These spirits ruled the places where they lived. Those of the desert lived with fire, those of the forest with the earth. Those who lived in the sea were ruled by water, and those who lived in the clouds were directed by the air. One of the kingdoms, called Danaan, lived in the forest. The Danaans loved all things in their realm. They lived so as not to disturb the plants and animals, and you could walk for miles through their kingdom and never know they were there. That is, until you looked up. Looking up, you would see in the treetops the most beautiful houses made of wood and with straw roofs. The trees of the forest of Danaan had wide, thick trunks that would take 20 children holding hands to circle around. The branches of the trees were almost as thick as their trunks, and it would take 50 children standing on one another's shoulders to reach the first branch. These great trees spread out far and wide, so much so that the light from the sun barely touched the ground. In those branches were the homes of the Danaans, and there they lived, happy and content. The kingdom of Danaan was ruled by an honest and loving king named Tuatha, who had a beautiful queen called Dana. It was Queen Dana who the kingdom was named after, because the beauty of the forest was matched only by hers. Together, Tuatha and Dana had a beautiful and charming daughter named Tara. Princess Tara loved her father and mother very much. She often spent long hours in the forest with her mother, learning how the plants could help people from being sick. She would also go hunting with her father, learning how to track the animals and how to move through the forest without making a sound. Tara was so good at this that she could step on a dried leaf, and not even a crunch could be heard under the weight of her foot. On a bright sunny day, Tara was out on the balcony of her palace room when her father came in and asked her if she would like to go hunting. Always ready to spend the day with her father, Tara ran for the bow and arrows on her wall and was ready in an instant. Now, you are probably wondering how the Danaans get to the ground from so high up in the trees. Well, the Danaans are very strong, and at every balcony are long vines stretching from the tops of the trees to the ground. All a Danaan has to do is grab a vine and slide down. It is very easy for them. There is, however, one thing they like to do. They constantly have contests to see who is the best at swinging. It is quite showy, and they have fun. King Tuatha snatched up Tara, jumped off the balcony, and by the time he was at the nearest vine, she was on his back, and down they swirled. King Tuatha was the champion vine catcher of the kingdom. Tuatha and Tara had a little thing they liked to do when catching a vine. Tuatha would swing straight out from the vine and spiral down, and just before they touched the ground, Tara would jump off and see how many flips she could do. The trick was that she had to time it so that she and her father would touch the ground at the same time. Her record was 5 flips. In the competitions at the festivals, no one could beat them. So, on this bright sunny day, Tuatha and Tara landed on the ground. Here and there the bright sun would stream through the trees from above, but mostly it was shaded and somewhat dark. Tara managed 4 flips and hit the ground right next to her father. Tuatha hugged her close. He was so proud of his daughter. She was everything he could want in a child. The two of them set off together in search of some sign of an animal that might help to feed their people. Usually, it was Tuatha who found the first sign, but on this day, Tara found the track of a lister. Now, what is a lister, you may ask? A lister is something like 3 animals we know. It looks a bit like a horse, with sharp horns like a deer, and a tail like a lion. Listers are very strong, and they are not fond of being hunted. So when a Danen is on their trail, and they can smell them, they hunt back. It is a very dangerous thing for Danens, but they are very brave, and they teach their children to hunt listers from a very young age. Tara looked at her father eagerly. "He's a big one. Let's go get him." Tuatha looked very serious. "Do not be so quick to run, Tara. That way lies death. You know better." The signs were fresh, and Tuatha could see on a nearby tree by the chipped bark that this lister had been sharpening its horns. Tara saw the stern look on her father's face. It always made her think twice about things. Her father was staring at the bark above his head. In order for him to see it at eye level, he would have had to stand on someone's shoulders who was as tall as he. This was a big lister, the biggest that Tara would have ever seen. Tuatha was having doubts about hunting this particular lister with his daughter. He kept silent, because this was the biggest lister he had ever seen. Anyway, it was too late. The tracks were very fresh. So fresh, as a matter of fact, that they did not know that the lister had been watching them. So, why did the lister just watch them and not attack while they were unaware? It is because they will not kill unless they have no other choice. This lister was watching to see if Tuatha and Tara were going to hunt it. That was the way of the forest. The Danens were the same way. If they found themselves in the company of a creature, they would let it pass. However, if a Danen needed food and had to hunt, a creature would not just let itself be killed. The Danens called this Mas Turak, which means what should be will be. Tuatha heard the lister first and turned. Seeing her father, Tara turned to see what had caught his eye. They both were staring up at the lister that towered above them. Tuatha held out his arms to his side and kneeled. Tara did the same. They both bowed their heads in respect. Tuatha looked up and said in a very respectful tone, "Mas Turak," and Tara repeated the words after him. The lister stamped its foot and snorted.